Hello, I'm David Hughes. Welcome to Your Perfect Body, the podcast of the Esoteric Teaching community. Today's selection is an essay entitled Disconnected from the Source. The Vedic literature is not monolithic, but highly variegated. Nevertheless, all the various specialized departments of Vedic knowledge share a common transcendental ontology based on the science of consciousness. This is the Esoteric Teaching, Vyasadevas' commentary on his own Vedanta-sutra. The various specialized branches of Vedic knowledge, such as ayur-veda, medicine, jyotir-veda, astrology, dhanur-veda, martial arts, natya-sangita, dance and music, and hatha-yoga, can be understood properly only within the universal framework of the Vedic spiritual ontology of consciousness. All Vedic arts and sciences operate within a broad context of spiritual realization, using a standard system of background axioms, the Vedic transcendental ontology of the Esoteric Teaching. To study any branch of Vedic wisdom in isolation from its cultural and ontological context assures distortion of its meaning, misunderstanding of its instructions, and consequent failure to achieve the highest aim of its practice. The most prominent example of this is hatha-yoga, usually presented in the West simply as a physical exercise form. The actual practice of hatha-yoga consists of 8 sequential stages: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. The original Vedic literature on yoga states that the practice of yoga has 8 limbs or steps, beginning with yama and niyama, and that the aim of all yoga practice is samadhi, or complete spiritual enlightenment. Pungsham gating mrigayatam iha yoga margair. Dhyana spadam bahumatam nayanabhiramam. Pangsnang vapur darshayanam ananya siddhair. Outpattikai smagaranan yutam ashtabhoghai. Sri Narayan is the form of the Lord, which is meditated upon by the followers of the yoga process, and this transcendental form is pleasing to the yogis in meditation. This form is not imaginary, but factual, as proved by the great yogis. The Lord is full in 8 kinds of mystical achievements, or yoga siddhis. Therefore his beautiful transcendental form displays 8 limbs. But full perfection in these achievements is not possible for others. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:15-45. So, teaching one limb of the 8 limbs of yoga, such as asana, without the prerequisites of yama and niyama is irresponsible. Practicing asana, and especially pranayama, without yama niyama will not lead to the intended result, samadhi, or complete cessation of material misery, and the attainment of chit shakti, or transcendental bliss, and it may actually harm the unwary student. For example, the very first item in yama niyama is to accept initiation from a bona fide spiritual master teacher situated in one of the 4 authorized Vedic disciplic lineages. And how many of you have heard this in your yoga class? Thus, before entering the study of any branch of Vedic wisdom, one should clearly understand the entire cultural context and spiritual ontology of which it is a part. Similarly, in authentic Vedic spiritual culture, Tantra is considered a very advanced and dangerous practice. The actual tantric esoteric schools are secret, and students can enter them by invitation only. No one is invited to study Tantra in India unless they first become highly qualified in Vedic wisdom. Qualified candidates for tantric study must have mastered at least 2 or 3 of the Vedic spiritual arts, such as Sanskrit, chanting mantras, temple worship, devotional music and dance, Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, Sankhya philosophy, and so forth, and be accepted as a qualified Brahmana before even being considered. A Brahmana is someone who has realized the mantra Aham Brahmasmi, or I am an eternal spirit soul, a pure conscious entity different from my material body and mind. And they must have attained the state of Brahma Bhuta, as described in Bhagavad Gita. The prospective tantrika must study the tantras in the original Sanskrit language and grasp their deep esoteric purpose. They must also be accomplished in the practice of sense control, including celibacy. Only such a highly qualified and self-realized person is able to practice Tantra successfully. Anyone who attempts to practice Tantra without these qualifications will certainly fail. The actual practice of Tantra must be performed under the close supervision of a highly self-realized spiritual master, as mentioned in the Tantras themselves, or one's false practice of Tantra will consume him and destroy his spiritual life. Very few teachers of Vedic self-realization practices in the West today are initiates or authorized representatives of the 4 Vedic disciplic lineages. Nor do teachers of hatha-yoga, tantra, and meditation reveal to their students that the techniques they teach are only partial and that the methods are substantially altered from the original. They fail to make the original Vedic source literatures of their spiritual disciplines available to their students, and they do not disclose that they have removed their techniques from the original cultural and ontological context for which they were designed. They do not inform their students that the results of practicing their partial altered teaching cannot possibly be the same as practicing the original teaching in the proper Vedic context. Nor do they follow the message transmission and error correction protocols given in the Vedas to prevent alteration of their spiritual message. All these factors guarantee that the Vedic practices taught in the West today will not produce the result for which they were originally intended. Western schools of yoga, and especially Tantra, are in a degenerate condition. Despite this fact, the modern purveyors of derivative Vedic techniques retain the original name, such as yoga, tantra, or dhyana, meditation, even though their teachings have little or nothing to do with the original practices. This is an old salesman's trick called bait and switch. Offer the customer a product of great value for little cost, then substitute an inferior item without the customer's knowledge. If you fall for this, you are considered a mark, a rube, a dupe, a fool. Want to buy a bridge in Brooklyn? Almost all Western presentations of Vedic subjects like yoga, tantra, and meditation are commercially motivated, detached, disconnected from their original source materials, subjected to government disinformation and other interference, are disconnected from the 4 authorized Vedic disciplic lineages, and do not use the standard Vedic error correction protocols in transmitting their teachings. Is it any wonder that presentations of the Vedic arts in the West have become distorted? In fact, they are almost unrecognizable. Today, even if you go to India and search, it is very difficult to find an authentic Vedic school of self-realization. Almost all of them are polluted with various materialistic misunderstandings, from the ridiculous idea that the goal of self-realization is oneness with God, to the nonsensical practice of material sense gratification as a so-called spiritual path. When I was in my 20s, I did a comprehensive comparative study of all the Vedic self-realization methods available in the West. Let me share the results and save you some time. Only the school of the Esoteric Teaching has maintained the original high standard